Mr. Chair, I'll keep it short. Just a couple of things to add upon. You talked about challenges that we face that make it difficult for us to do some of the things that we do, and those are the unfunded mandates. It really makes it tough, especially I sit on Data Research Committee for the State Sheriff's Association, which is through the BSCC, Board of State Community Corrections, and there's so many different agency sizes throughout the state of California with so many different funding sources. And when you talk about Kings County with a high poverty rate and high unemployment rate, the funding may not be at the same level that other agencies is. And for example, for us, to retain video storage takes a lot. I tried to add video storage to our jail facility, which only records for 72 hours, which I absolutely do not like. The law, 26202.6 of the Government Code, says you need to retain that for 1 year. I can't afford it. It was going to cost me $330,000 for 1 year of recording just to add those cameras. And so I would just ask and encourage the legislature to make sure that when you do approach new ideas and new things, please make sure they come with funding for us. And not that large agencies don't have that problem too, because they do as well, but especially there's a lot of small agencies in the state of California that's a huge struggle. We do a lot of the same programs, and I just want to touch on one that we do in Kings County that I think is really critically important. It was mentioned by the Fairfield Police Chief earlier, and we call ours a pathway, a law enforcement pathway class through our local high school, where we have deputies, police officers, retired deputies, CHP that go in and they teach in the high school classrooms and talk about what law enforcement's all about. But one of the biggest things that I find, and I did this to my kids as they became teenagers, is I made them look at the post-personal history statement questionnaire. Because kids nowadays have no clue what's going to be asked coming into a law enforcement job. And the 120 or so questions are in the post-personal history statement are really an eye-opening experience, so they know what to expect if they're going to apply for a law enforcement agency in the state of California. And I think we really need to encourage that at a younger level, that we get those moral and ethical values taught in our school system at these younger levels, so that way we have a better opportunity to recruit diverse people in our police forces and our sheriff's offices. So thank you for having me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Any questions from the panel?
I just have one quick question. I could ask a zillion, but I won't because I know what time. Not being from this area, but seeing the news every morning, what's going on in Stockton? I know you're doing a lot of this kind of policing, but yet every day I wake up to this, and I plan to ask my assembly member what is happening in Stockton, because either the media is there or something is changing, and I'm not really sure. I know you've had a lot of economic issues, and the city has had lots of things with housing and employment. I mean, and I know you're probably on the front line of it in terms of looking at it, and I'm seeing every day somebody's getting hurt, shot, whatever, not by police officers, but activity going on in the community. What is happening in Stockton, and what do you see as the direction that's going to happen there? Because I'm very concerned about this city of Stockton.
No, thank you for the concern for Stockton. I share it with you. Stockton historically has had a high crime rate. Typically, we follow only Oakland, per capita high violent crime rates for the entire state of California. And this goes back decades. So if we just look at we are in it for the long run. We're looking at the long-term trend lines. We're seeing, even though there's some spikes recently that have been very newsworthy, and those spikes are intolerable, I mean, as far as the number of shootings, actually violent crime is trending down significantly from our height in 2012. So the way I look at it is, especially with our violence reduction strategies, and we are gripped by really a gang problem. That's what it comes down to. We have a illegal gun and gang problem in Stockton, and again have for quite a while. But we are seeing through a lot of our violence reduction strategies and just the community coming together, peace walks with clergy, a whole host of things are going on, and there's still a lot of work to do, but we're actually seeing drops in those violent crime rates. It's just, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be still a lot of work at the ground level. We've got peacekeepers, which are gang street outworkers. We've got a lot of things like that going on that. We're building an Office of Violence Prevention, which was recently funded. So we've got a lot of great strategies, but we've got a long road ahead of us. But that's kind of a snapshot as to what's going on in Stockton.
Do you have much going on in the schools in terms of, justice training and things that they do? among peer police, peer advising, or whatever they call it in these schools nowadays. Are you doing any of that?
We have a little work to do with that as well. We have several school districts within the jurisdiction of Stockton, and they're low performing school districts typically, but they're really working hard on a lot of things. We actually too, just bringing in the police side of it with the pathway. We're starting our first ever with 5th through 8th graders this next school cycle, so that's new to us. But the Office of Violence Prevention for the City of Stockton recognizes it has to liaison with the school districts, and that is also just beginning.
Okay, because I know there are a lot of pieces that go into it, whether it's the schools, the economics, the options, the career developments, all those kinds of things, and I'm not sure what's in Stockton. So when I see it on the news every morning and every evening, I become concerned as to whether or not all the pieces are in place that make a difference, for the people there in terms of creating options and opportunities for young people to not only do well in school. I know most districts like that have low achieving schools, and that becomes a problem because the options and choices for kids to do well after school are limited, whether or not there's community college pieces tied to it, or career development, or apprenticeships, and just a host of things. So I'm just, being a person in my own community, when I see something like that, I immediately start asking these questions that run down the list, whether or not all these things are in place, because not being from this area, I find it very disconcerting when I wake up in the morning and I see it on the news. So I was just concerned. Thank you.
Mr. Gallagher?
Yeah, just in listening to the last two panels, I think one thing that we're dealing with is perspective. I mean, we've talked about that earlier in this hearing. I think there's a perspective in certain communities that there's a distrust, there's a disconnect with law enforcement. In the community I grew up in, very rural, not very diverse, although we did, probably a significant Latino population. Kind of grew up with a very healthy respect for law enforcement. Always had, I guess in the community that I grew up in, there wasn't really that perspective. But, then when I went to college at Berkeley, and interacted with some other students, students of color from urban areas, that perspective was very different. It was, there was even a fear of law enforcement. And that was a perspective that came from, what they saw and what they observed, what they experienced. So we have perspectives here of from that standpoint. I think we also have a perspective from law enforcement, which is every law enforcement person I've ever come in contact with and had the chance to talk about their job and what they do. I've never met a one who doesn't say, hey, I consider myself a community steward, as somebody who's here to protect the community and help people and get bad guys off the streets who are doing bad things to other people, to women and children and other people, to try and get at the drug problem that you see that is pervasive in our communities. So there's that perspective. I've never seen anybody who's set out to be antagonistic or to be an authoritarian. So, and I guess one of the things I'm struggling with is that there's so much perspective, I think, on all sides. And I think there's a difference between perspective and what is really the case. And I think one of the things I'm struggling with, and one of the things I think that I hope we'll get to, is what is the real data? In the three cases that were kind of cited earlier that we've all been hearing about in the news, to be honest, I mean, as much as I've heard about it in the news and I've seen it in all the news cycles, I still don't know what happened in any of those cases. So it's hard for me to, as a legislator or even as an individual, to really make a judgment or determination as to what should be different, what should have been done differently. And again, it's that noise that we're talking about, that I was talking about earlier, is I hear all this noise and I still don't know, because we haven't allowed the time for an investigation of what happened in each of those instances, for me to be able to say, hey, this is what could have been done better. And so maybe my question for you is, what kind of data do we have out there right now, like in terms of what we've seen in some of the demographics, in terms of officer-related shootings? What are we seeing that there's a higher percentage towards certain communities? What kind of data do we have out there that can, and are we seeing certain recurring themes or wrong steps that could have been remedied? Is there any kind of data out there right now that that anybody's collecting that maybe might help inform things that could be done differently to help avoid these kind of situations?
So I will, Assembly Member, I will try to address that. So from the law enforcement perspective, more officers were shot and killed in the line of duty, or there were more line of duty deaths this past year than it's been in quite some time. So that's disconcerting on the law enforcement side. Agencies do track and keep data, but I know that part of the handouts that was given to everyone today came from the President's 21st Century Policing Plan, and some of that information in there is talking about what kind of statistical information to gather into a federal body so that the whole nation will know what is going on. So that's definitely something that we're looking at. Do we all have that kind of data and that information, and is it similar across law enforcement entities? I would guess probably not, because we don't have a centralized location such as a uniform crime report. So we report information in on Part 1 and Part 2 crimes into a federal system. They kick out information. We're able to compare apples with apples. So until we as a law enforcement profession work with our legislators and our community to come up with what those apples to apples comparisons are, it will be challenging to get that information. Last point, and you really do look as though you are struggling and wrestling with this notion and idea of what the heck is going on in law enforcement. I assure you that we are struggling the same exact way. We are struggling with ways to reach out and communicate with different communities, either of color, or of gender, or whatever. I would contend, though, that without these types of dialogues and discussions, we will never get anywhere, and we will continue to have that same uneasiness that we all have. So we're looking forward to the data. We're looking forward to more probing questions. We're looking forward to the opportunities to better engage with you.
Great. Thank you, guys. I know Chief Jones has a council meeting.
Yes, I do.
So I want to thank you guys for coming. And we've got one more panel, saving the best for last. Sacramento Police Department, we have Lieutenant Roman Murrieta. And from the Paradise Missionary Baptist Church, we have Pastor Alonzo G. Morris. Thank you for waiting around, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thanks for having us, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for allowing Sacramento Police Department and our partner clergy to be part of this very important discussion. I think we've heard a lot here today about relationships, and I can't emphasize that enough. Yet you have to believe in it. Cops and clergy is a philosophy, and if you don't believe in it, officers, I'm sure as pastors in the community, they'll see right through it. They'll see right through it. And I will say this, that we gain the trust in the trying. This isn't for every officer. This isn't for every pastor. We're not going to save every gangster. Doesn't mean we don't try. And we're out there every day. As individuals and collectively together, I believe we are making a difference. So cops and clergy, it sounds like a great idea for a sitcom, saving souls and saving lives. The truth is that it is actually not that far-fetched. Legal and illegal, right and wrong. Protect and serve, called to serve. Saving lives, saving souls. These are just a few similarities between our callings and are great examples of how clergy and law enforcement can help each other accomplish the Sacramento Police Department's mission of making Sacramento the safest big city in California. In 2013, partnerships were established with the SPD gang enforcement team, faith-based leaders from several local churches, and sociology students from CSU Sacramento. The primary goal of the Cops and Clergy program is the development of trust between SPD, the clergy, and the communities that they both serve. The trust is developed and nurtured through relationship building and positive actions. The bottom line is that if we don't have trust, then we don't have anything. We won't have intervention, we won't have prevention, we won't even have meaningful dialogue. I am proud to say that SPD began this partnership before any negative events occurred this past year that have had such a dramatic influence on public opinion and how law enforcement is viewed across this country. And I believe that because we started this program before all that, it gives us legitimacy. Consequently, a lot of the relationship building and positive actions cops and clergy has been involved with this past year have centered around public education about what we do at SPD, and not just about what we do, but why. Fortunately, SPD was well prepared, and because we have been working with our faith leaders for nearly 2.5 years, we have established lines of communication, relationships, and trust. Our relationships, along with our annual Ministers Academy, has resulted in our clergy being better informed, better educated, and better armed to deal with the national issues that are having a direct effect right here in Sacramento. Because of those issues, public safety in certain circles now also means safety from the police. Our faith leaders are the bridge that can help lessen that divide through education and relationship building. They speak at our academies and visit our roll calls. They share their perspective and introduce new officers to their congregations, some of those congregations bigger than our department. Our officers, in turn, visit their congregations and are encouraged to get out of their patrol cars and into the community, taking advantage of the opportunities to have positive contacts with the community. And I'll tell you what, our officers get paid to be curious. So when they're out there doing their job and looking and they see a group and they're wondering what they're doing, and one of those young men or women turns around and says, "Oh, hey, I saw you at church," or "I saw you at that community meeting," it changes the entire dynamic of the entire call. Truth is composed of 3 things: knowledge, experience, and intent of the heart. The most important of the 3 is intent of the heart. Our senior pastor calls this coming with the correct spirit, and it is paramount to change. It is paramount to our relationship with our clergy and with the community. What we are doing is beyond community policing. Our clergy have the correct spirit, and they are the bridge that is affecting positive change within our department and the community. Many officers have referred at-risk youth and families to our program. Clergy have provided mentorship, meals, school supplies, getting family members into drug rehab and mental health programs, as just a couple examples. As a result, more officers are now seeing the opportunities for cops and clergy to intervene and hopefully prevent future negative involvement with law enforcement. When the police are called, it is usually a negative situation, and someone is usually going to jail. When the cops and clergy team comes out to follow up on a referral, the family is almost always surprised and very thankful that an SPD officer cared enough to make a referral. And 9 times out of 10, when we show up, it's mom or grandma, that is saying to us, "Heck yeah, I'm tired of the way he's living. Those are his kids I'm raising. He's locked up again." And the gangsters, when we show up, they still don't know how to take it. They're like, "Yeah, they actually brought a pastor. They're inside now talking to grandma or talking to mom." It's still very new and always catches them off guard. So recently, a part of our cops and clergy leadership team attended the 2015 LA Gang Violence Conference, where we presented a session on our cops and clergy program. I was proud of all the positive attention and interest our group received for our work we are doing in our community. Overall, our group learned from and was inspired by experts from around the world. More than anything else, this conference provided affirmation that we are on the right track, we have the right people, and now is the right time for such a program. And with that, I'd like to introduce Pastor Alonzo Morris.
All right. Good afternoon to you, Chairman Cooper, to the other staff. Lieutenant Marietta said it very well. It gives, as pastors, before this partnership, we were doing a lot of this liaison stuff between our parishioners and the police department, but now we're partnered together, and it makes a tremendous impact when the pastor of the church, who is pretty much the gatekeeper to that group of congregation, validate and introduce the police department to our congregations. Because if we're standing there, and I'm talking about on a Sunday morning, saying, this is Lieutenant Marietta, we're involved in this program, we're going to be working in the community, we're going to be reaching out to the youth, and instead of arresting them in an enforcement type way, we're going to try to to give them an opportunity to take advantages of the things that we offer. And it's been very valuable. Give you a perfect example. There was a time we were doing not a ride-along, but part of our program. And there was a group of, we were on our way to talk to some young people that were referred to the program because they were missing school. On the way there, we saw a group of young people just kind of hanging out. Daytime, they should have been in school. We stopped just to talk to them and see what they're doing that time of day. To my surprise, one of the young men was a member of my congregation. And the whole conversation changed. They were standoffish. They didn't want anything to say to the police. But when they saw me standing there, he's like, hey, Pastor. And I said, what are you doing? How come you're not at school? So it gives the people in the community a perfect dynamic duel. You have the pastor there who every time somebody dies, every time there's a real problem, we're there. So we have access in their homes. You have access to their hearts. Then you have the police department who's helping the situation. So I think that we've created the perfect partnership. I think that we're being very proactive. One of the young ladies in my congregation applied to be a police officer, not because we asked her to, but because she's seeing the positive interaction that's going on. So I think that cops and clergy is something that's ahead of its time. The police are already there doing their work. The pastor's already there in the community doing the work, and now we're doing it together. And it's been something that's been very positive and very well received.
No, great. I want to thank you both. It's an amazing program. Being here in Sacramento, I'm very well aware of it. I think it's a good partnership between the faith community and law enforcement. We need all the help we can get. So I appreciate you guys coming. I know it was a very long day and you sat through the hearing, but I truly appreciate it. And now I want to open up to public comment. Anybody in the audience wish to comment? Okay, well, that's the end of our hearing. Thank you for coming. This is just a start. Obviously, it's a hot-button topic, and the goal of this select committee is to try and better and really repair the relationship between law enforcement and the community. There is a disconnect there, no matter what side you're on, and hopefully through this committee we can bring folks together and bridge some of those gaps because it is critical. It's trying times, and it's tough. It's tough, and there's been a lot of attention focused on law enforcement throughout the country. So we're going to need the community's help, the faith-based community, and everybody to come together. So I want to thank you all, and have a good day.
Cool. Thank you.